Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Kate Joy. I guess I'm just going to cut straight to it. You guys have already seen the title of the video. So today I'm going to give you some quick tips on how to sleep train your baby. Okay, so first off, I would like to start out by saying I'm not a professional. I'm not a pediatrician. I am in no way trying to say that I have the best and only way to sleep train your baby. I'm not saying when you should sleep train your baby. I'm really just coming to you as a mom and just telling you my experiences with sleep training, and I've been really successful. So if there's any tips or tricks that I can share with other moms out there just to, help you get more sleep, help you feel more comfortable, make you feel like yourself, again, even just a little bit, that would be really just my goal in this. So I'm just sharing my experiences and just sharing kind of who I am and my story with sleep training, and hopefully I could help other moms out there. So we'll just jump right into it. So the first thing I want to share about sleep training, my first tip would really be to create a sleep schedule or like a sleep, like nighttime routine. So really what that means is, like, for example, my son Uriah, the first thing that I do is obviously, you feed them, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, you feed them, you get them in their jammies, you change their diaper and you make sure that they get them ready for bed. But one thing that I do before bed is, we sing songs together. Sometimes I'll read a book with him, and then we pray together. I put his little nightlight on, I dim the lights, and we just have kind of a nighttime routine before we actually put him to bed. And what this does is this kind of communicates to them, your baby, oh, okay, it's time to wind down. It's time to go to sleep. So that's kind of my first recommendation, is just kind of create a routine. And let's say you want your baby to go to bed at 9 p.m. That's awesome, or 8, or, whatever time works really best for you and your family. It's totally up to you guys. But let's say, for example, Uriah, I really want to put him to bed around 9. That's a really good time for me. But that means I usually start my sleep routine, my sleep schedule and nighttime routine around 8:15, to get him fed and changed and put him in his jammies and read books and sing songs, spend time with him and pray. That's pretty much what I do. It takes about 45 minutes to do all of that. Between 8:15 and 8:30 is when I start, and I get him in bed, in the crib, ready to sleep at 9, and he falls asleep shortly after. So just creating that routine is probably the best thing I could recommend, because, subconsciously they start to realize, okay, this means that it's about to be time for bed. The second tip that I have for you would be to create a word that you use repetitively that you associate with sleep. So something that I do for Uriah is I say, it's night time. Like, it's night time, Baba. It's time to go night. And night is our word for sleep. So whether you want to say, sleepy time, bedtime, whatever, me and my husband always say, okay, Baba, it's night time. Go night. And so that's a word that we use repetitively, really only when we're putting him to sleep. And so he knows when he hears that, now especially, he really associates that with sleep. So when we say, it's night time, it's going to be night time, he understands that, okay, I'm going to be put to bed soon. And so along with just, setting up a nighttime routine and using a repetitive word over and over again, he's really going to start to understand what nighttime is, and that it's time for sleep. And he starts to kind of wind down on his own. So those are just kind of my own personal tips. I followed these simple steps, and I actually sleep trained my son in just 1 week. Less than 7 days even. I mean, the second and third day are kind of iffy and kind of hard, especially that first night too. But by the 5th day, something clicked with him, and he began to start sleeping. And it was magical. I began to see like a light at the end of the tunnel by the 5th night. So as long as you kind of follow these steps, it worked for me. Within less than a week, my son was completely sleep trained, and he's still sleep trained to this day. Now let's get down to business and let's talk about sleep training. So one thing about sleep training is that you're starting to put the babies down to sleep when they're awake. So I can speak from personal experience. My son Uriah, I had always put him to bed his whole life. I mean, all 4 months, right? His whole life, I'd always put him to bed by breastfeeding him. He would always fall asleep when I was feeding him, and I would put him down. The whole purpose of sleep training is teaching your baby how to fall asleep on their own. You want them to put themselves to sleep, and really teaching them and training them to self-soothe. So that's the whole point. So I know from personal experience, I can kind of say that for my son, for his whole life, all 4 months, that as I was putting him to sleep, I would breastfeed him, and that he would fall asleep when I was feeding him, and then I'd put him down. And then he'd wake up and he'd want to eat, and he'd want to eat, and he'd want to eat. And I felt so discouraged. And I realized my pediatrician actually told me that he only really knows how to go to sleep after being fed. Because every time he's fed, he falls asleep and he gets put to bed. He doesn't really know how to put himself to sleep without eating. So that's kind of the whole purpose of what sleep training is. So you really want to start putting your baby to sleep when they're awake. So the first night of sleep training, this is what you do. I had to switch up my routine. I actually had to breastfeed him first because he would always fall asleep when he was eating. So I would breastfeed him, make sure that he got nice and full, try to give him a really good heavy feeding. And once I got done feeding him and, try to keep him awake the whole time. And then once we got done feeding, I would actually get him up and I would change his diaper and get him in his jammies. And that would definitely wake him up. So I would get him ready for bed in that way, kind of do our nighttime routine, and then I would put him down in the crib. And of course, I would say, good night, Bubba, I love you. And I would leave him in there and I would walk away. And he would immediately start crying, of course, as normal babies would. They say, like, why are you leaving me? This is foreign, this is new. And then, of course, they don't like the process. So he starts to cry. As soon as he starts to cry, you set your timer for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes goes by, you go in, you check on him, and you kind of say, okay, Bubba, like, how are you? Mama loves you. It's night-night time. And you just kind of talk to him. You don't go when you pick him up. You just kind of hang over by the door and you just talk to him. And you say, hey, Bubba, I'm here for you. You just let him know that you haven't left him or her. You just let them know that you haven't left, that you're still there, that you love them. You just use the calm, soothing tone of your voice and just say, baby, I love you, but it's night-night time. And it's time to go sleepy, okay? I love you. Mama's right here. And then you walk away. And then instead of this time, before you set your timer for 5 minutes, now you set it for 10 minutes. And then you go, if he's still crying, which he probably is, you go in and you check on them and you say, Mama's here, baby. I love you. It's night-night time. And then you kind of walk out and you set your timer for 15. And then you set it for 20, and then you set it for 25, and yada, yada, yada. So on and so forth. And they're definitely asleep by then. So once they fall asleep, you kind of just go check on them, and you'll see that they're asleep. It might take them a while, but they'll go to bed. Now that first night, if they're used to eating, throughout the night, whenever they do cry and wake up to eat, make sure that you feed them half as much. So let's say you normally do like a 10-minute feeding, or maybe it's just a really quick, midnight feeding where it's like 5 minutes or so. If it's a 10-minute, you cut to 5. If it's 5 minutes, cut to 2.5, 3 minutes. Don't feed them as much as you usually do. My pediatrician actually told me that babies really only wake up because they're used to eating. It's an internal clock, but they actually don't really need to eat. Around 4 or 5 months, they don't really need to eat at night. They can actually sleep through the whole night. But their internal clock wakes them up because they say, okay, time to eat, time to eat, time to eat. But really, they don't need it. So that's what I'll just kind of say for all you moms that are saying, feed him half as much. Really just know that he doesn't quite need it. They don't really need it to eat during the night unless there's different circumstances. So my son, I fed him half as much that first night every time he'd wake up, and then I'd put him down awake each time. And then once I put him to sleep, I would do it all over again. 5, 10, 15, 20, and all those, increments. I would go check on him and talk to him, and he'd fall back asleep. Every time he wakes up, I would feed him half as much, and I would do that same process. Now, the second night, it changes up just a little bit. You don't feed him throughout the night. Him or her, I say him because, of course, I have my son, but you don't feed your baby that second night. And that second and third night can be really hard because they start to kind of get the drift of what's going on, and they don't like it. And they will cry and cry and cry, and that is okay. So that second night, you do the same thing, do your nighttime routine, get it kind of figured out. It can take a few nights to kind of get it down into a rhythm. And then once you're ready to put them down when they're awake, and then they start to cry. But next time, you don't set your timer for 5 minutes, you set it for 10 on that second night. And then you check it for 10 minutes, you check in on them and comfort them. Just talk, you don't pick them up. And then you set your timer for 15, 20, 25, 30, and that's kind of how that goes. And then he falls asleep. And then when he wakes up in that middle of the night again for that feeding, instead of feeding them, you set your timer for that, 5, 10, 15, 20, and you just check on them and you verbally let them know that you're there for them, you love them, that you haven't left them, but it's time to go to bed. And you'd kind of talk to them and you check on them in those increments, and then they go to bed. And you do that every time they wake up. And it's so exhausting, but it's worth it, I promise. That third night, do the same thing. Except this time, when you put them to bed, you put them to bed awake, you put them down, and once they start crying, you set the timer for 15 minutes. So the first day it's 5, second day it's 10, third day it's 15, and then 15, 20, 25, 30, and you kind of start those increments all over again. You don't feed them, and every time they wake up, you set your timer. And then you say, okay, baby, I'm here, and you check in on them just as you did when you put them to sleep. You do that every time they wake up. By that fourth and fifth night, I think for my son, it kind of started to click with him, and he kind of started to realize that it was okay, and he would cry less during the night. He would, I don't know, maybe cry 1 or 2 minutes, and then he'd put himself back to sleep. He learned, okay, it's not time to get up yet, and he'd put himself back to sleep, and it was awesome. And by that 7th day, he didn't cry. And so it was 7 a.m. as time for me to go get him. So I went and checked on him at 7 a.m. He was awake, but he wasn't crying. He was just cooing, playing, talking, playing with his feet, and he was just relaxed. And he realized it's okay. He didn't cry when I put him down for sleep, and he didn't cry when it was time for me to wake up. He just knew, okay, I'm associating this crib with night time. It means it's time to go to sleep. And now he sleeps all the way through the night. And that's my tips and tricks. That's how it worked. I did that one process, as I kind of explained to you, for 7 days in total. I mean, he really got it by the 5th day, but by the 7th day, he was completely calm, and you could tell that there was an absolute difference and a comfort with him sleeping in his own bed and putting himself to sleep. And then the most important thing I can say about sleep training, truly, is if you made it this far in the video, if there's one thing that you take away from this video, it should be this one thing. Do not start sleep training until you're ready to sleep train. I can say from my own personal experience that, my son, he slept in a little bassinet in, my bed with my husband and I. And then he eventually, transitioned to the halo bassinet that swivels on and off the bed. So he pretty much slept with us his whole life. And it was comforting to him, but it was also comforting to me. And it's not only a change for them, it's a change for you. And it's really, really kind of an abrupt change. And it's just as hard, I think, for the mom as it is for the baby. So if you are personally not ready to make this commitment and do it, I just say do not do it. Don't do it. Do not do it. And the reason I say this is because, for example, let's say you start the sleep training process, but by the 3rd night, you put them down, you set your timer for 15 minutes, and they're crying, and they're crying, and they're crying. And then you go check on them, and then you come back 20 minutes later, and then 25. Let's say you make it to 30 or 35 minutes later, he's been crying for an hour and a half or so, maybe 2 hours. And he's crying and crying, and you can tell that he genuinely is upset. Those are real tears, and it breaks your heart. And you're like, you know what, I can't do this. I have to go get him. And you go get him, and you let him sleep in your bed again, or you let him sleep with you in the bassinet. What I can say is that will create really bad behavior, and all of a sudden, he'll realize if I cry long enough, there's my baby. He just woke up from his nap. He'll start to realize, if I cry long enough, my mama will come get me. And that ruins everything. It'll make whenever you are ready to sleep train it so much harder. When you do it, you have to do it well. You have to do it well. You have to do it with all that you have, even though it's so hard. You have to try your very best. And not only will it help you, but it'll help your baby. And having that level of structure and just a little bit of discipline in there, all of a sudden, that will make them feel so much more secure, and they'll be at peace, and there won't be any confusion for them. And so that's my number one thing, is if you're not ready to sleep train, please don't sleep train. So, I guess that's it. That's just my story on sleep training. Let me go get my little one. He's up, so hold on. All right, so this is my son. He just woke up from his nap, huh? Would that go nap? I think he's hungry. So I guess I'll sign off here. This is my baby boy. And one thing I can say for the sleep training, I did it for overnight and he slept through the night great. He sleeps 10 hours. He wakes up in the morning wonderfully. And now what I can say is I actually, during the day, I sleep trained him for naps. It works for, sleeping through the night, and it works for naps. Same thing. If you need to put them down for a nap and they just won't go down, they keep crying, you can use those same tools for sleep training them for naps. Excuse me. You got my hair. No. But yeah, you could use the same thing for naps as you do for overnight sleeping, and it worked really well for me, and it really helped me get my son in a really good kind of schedule. Hey, Bubba. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in if you're watching this far. Thank you for watching, and go ahead and try it. If you guys are trying it and it works really well, leave like a thumbs up or something, and maybe subscribe. I just want to kind of create and join a community of moms on YouTube. There's so many moms on YouTube that I've watched that have helped me with my first baby, and now I want to kind of give my 2 cents in my experiences, and I want to help other moms that were in the same position as I was. And so, yeah, say thank you for watching. Say thank you for watching. Say bye-bye. Say bye-byes. All right, guys. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you for watching. Bye.